my friend, and welcome to another episode of After the Coffee. Now, last Monday, January 23rd, the topic was trust. And I shared with you the importance of trust between a leader and their people. But when we're asked to trust somebody, we get an idea of what trust is. We all kind of have this understanding of trust. But if we're asked to define it, we're often left with less words than we can use to define trust. Oh, well, they're reliable and so on and so forth. Trust is not necessarily something that happens within a single interaction, as you probably are well aware of. In your relationships, those people that you trust are those people who have supported you and come through for you and kept their commitments to you over time. Anybody can be reliable, meaning, hey, I'll pick you up at this time, and they show up and they pick you up, right? If you need a ride. Let me share with you a story about trust, and it may help us gain some insight. So every year, my sister holds a Super Bowl party at her home, and she is really well known for her fantastic chili that she makes. And one year I remember my nephew, little Donnie, he was hanging out with us in my sister's living room before the game began and paying attention to all the adults. He's, I would say, probably at this age, maybe 3 years old, toddler. So anyway, the game begins and we go into the den and everybody's, watching the game. And my sister notices little Donnie going into the kitchen. And she says, "Don't touch the pot on the stove. It's hot." It was the pot full of chili that she'd made. And so what does he do? He goes up and touches the pot. Yes, screaming ensued. He realized that what he did in comparison to what his mother told him matched up. So when you have what someone says, your experience, and the equal sign in between the two, then you begin to develop trust because you're comparing what you're hearing to what you're seeing or experiencing, and they match up. And now little Donnie has trust in the form of a couple of different little, well, let's say blisters on his fingers. It wasn't anything we had to rush him to the hospital for. It was more of a surprise than it was anything else. And then later, we go back into the living room. It was halftime, I think. And she noticed that little Donnie was paying attention to this little yadril. It's a porcelain figurine of a kitten with a mouse sitting on its tail. And they're not cheap. My sister likes to collect neat stuff like that, and she puts it out. And so Donnie goes over and looks at the figurine and looks like he's going to pick it up. And his mother says, "Donnie, don't touch that. It'll break." So he pulls back. And then the game, second half starts. So we all pile into the den to watch the game. And I see out of the corner of my eye, little Donnie goes over and he picks up the porcelain figurine of the cat and mouse, and he looks at it, and he kind of gives a little bit of a smile, and then he puts it back down carefully. And what didn't happen? Yeah, it didn't break. It didn't break. So he has come to the conclusion in his thought process, in his mind, that although mom tells the truth, she's not correct all the time. She's not It's not so much of a uh, deliberate break of trust, but when she told him that something would happen and it didn't, that was what she said didn't equal his experience. And that may not lead to mistrust immediately, but it embedded in little Donnie's mind doubt. And how many of us have experienced that in our relationships, right? So doubt over time certainly becomes mistrust if we keep not matching up our experience to what we're being told. That's the development of trust or mistrust in all relationships. And whether it is you as a leader in some capacity in your work life, or a participant, right, in your family, in your relationships, we have to be aware. And if we're constantly apologizing for, oh, yeah, I told you I would do that, I'm sorry. Well, that may make you unreliable. People may still trust you fundamentally, but we have to be aware of these things. Self-awareness in relationship is very, very important. We need to know how we show up, because in our own minds, we may show up a certain way, but in the minds of those around us, we show up differently. How can we find out? Well, find an individual in our life that we trust and we believe that they'll give us honest feedback, and ask them, how do I show up? Do you see me as a trustworthy person? Chances are, if the relationship's long-term, they'll say yes. But then again, they'll say, well, in some ways you're trustworthy for sure, but in other ways, and then they'll give you some examples. More than likely, they don't just arbitrarily give you feedback. They're recalling events where you fell short of what they hoped or expected you to, perform at. So anyway, I want to leave you with that thought. It's hump day, so we're halfway through the week, right? I want you to leave you with that thought and think about where you are in terms of being trustworthy among your team, among your colleagues, with your leader and upper management, or as a spouse, or as a partner, or as a parent, or as a sibling, or as a friend. We play a lot of different roles, and how people see us in terms of being trustworthy and honest. Interesting how those two get tied together. Where do we stand? I think it's important that we know that. So think about that, will you? And I will see you next Monday on the Monday Morning Cup of Joe.